part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Full 40 College Basketball Podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. I am your host, Ben Billman, and I really appreciate you tuning in to see where we are in the world of college basketball. In the first half today, we're going to take a look at what happened over the weekend, this past weekend in college basketball, where we stand right now with conference standings and also national rankings. And in the second half, I'm going to be taking a look at the top 16 teams in the nation as we get ready for the committee to release their top 16 this upcoming Saturday. So the Super Bowl was yesterday. We have moved on from professional football. I guess if we can ever say we move on, it seems nowadays like it's a year-long adventure with the NFL and everything that goes along with it. But in my world, the NFL is done, and now my sole attention and all of my interest is turning to college basketball. It's there most of the year anyway, but now there's nothing else holding it back. So college basketball is at the forefront of everything in the sports world right now. Some might argue that with pitchers and catchers coming back to baseball, that takes some of the luster away. But I am still college basketball at heart and always will be. So, looking at what has happened over the last few days in college basketball, we are starting to see a much clearer picture in these conference standings of where teams are falling. And then also, when it comes to the bubble teams, those teams that are right on the edge of either getting in or not getting in on Selection Sunday. There were some big results over the weekend that had dramatic effects on where these teams will be with about a month left in the season before Selection Sunday. So first of all, one of the teams that got a much-needed win was Texas A&M. They absolutely destroyed Tennessee at home. Texas A&M has had an up-and-down season so far, and they needed a spotlight win in order to solidify their case for an NCAA tournament bid. And they got that in great fashion on Saturday by beating Tennessee, who was number 6 in the nation. They beat them 85-69. So now Texas A&M has to feel pretty confident now that they've got a signature win. They're on the right side of the bubble, in my opinion, and I think they are well on their way to getting an NCAA tournament bid with the way they're playing. Another team that got a much-needed win was Michigan State. They had a home game against Illinois on Saturday, who at the time was number 10, and they won 88-80. Again, Michigan State got off to a very flat start in the non-conference schedule and then looked very pedestrian at the beginning of the Big Ten. But they have began to recover. Their computer rankings are looking very solid, and right now Tom Izzo has to feel pretty confident that if they can stay on this steady track the rest of the season, they will get another bid to the NCAA tournament. Florida, a team that again needed a signature win, got one on Saturday over number 12 Auburn. They beat Auburn 81-65. A really great win for Florida. Again, a team that has gotten better as the season has gone on. And if the tournament started today, they would be in my bracket for March Madness. Another team that got a huge win for them is Gonzaga. Gonzaga went to Kentucky, who was number 17, and won 89-85. Now, the reason this is such a big win for Gonzaga is because up to this point in the season, they had absolutely zero quality wins or wins against top-level teams that would help solidify their resume for March Madness. So going into Kentucky, even though Kentucky is in a downward spiral right now, to win at Rupp Arena is a huge win for Gonzaga. They've got some work to do. They still need to do some work in the West Coast Conference. They probably need to win either the regular season or the conference tournament title. But if they don't, this still gives them a boost, and they can look and point to the Kentucky victory as one that could help them down the road. So those were the teams that really needed big wins that got them this weekend. But there were some teams that really needed to win that ended up losing, and because of that, I think they're on the outside looking in, at least at this point. The first team was Miami. Miami had a huge chance on Saturday to beat North Carolina, the number 3 team in the nation. Miami had them on the ropes. It was at Miami, and North Carolina pulled out a 75-72 victory and a crushing defeat for Miami. A Final Four participant last year, and as of today, they are not in the tournament. That North Carolina victory would have looked really good on their resume, but unfortunately, the chance has passed, and now they're going to have to look at other games in order to boost that resume. Another team that needed a big win and failed was Indiana. Indiana got a win earlier in the week at Ohio State, which looked like it might be the beginning of a boost in a resume and also just in quality of play for the Hoosiers. But then they go to Purdue on Saturday and get crushed by 20. At this point, I don't even have Indiana on my list of potential NCAA tournament teams. If they would have beaten Purdue, now we're talking bubble talk with them. But at this point, without a win against Purdue, it's looking very bleak for the Hoosiers. Cincinnati had a great chance on Saturday to beat a top 5 Houston team at home. Cincinnati's another team that plays in the Big 12, has all the strength of schedule numbers because of all the tough games they've played in conference, and they had a chance to take down the Cougars at home. This would have pushed Cincinnati into the bracket for me, but unfortunately they lost 67-62, and now Cincinnati has a lot of work to do to climb back in the discussion for an NCAA tournament bid. St. John's also had an opportunity on the road against a top 10 team in number 7 Marquette, and they failed. They lost by 11, 86-75. Again, St. John's is out. They would have been in with a win. The same for Colorado, lost by 20 at home to Arizona, a chance to get a top 10 victory at home, and they lost by 20. And then what is going on with Wisconsin right now? They are just falling apart. Similar to Kentucky, Wisconsin and Kentucky both are struggling to get wins right now. Now, Rutgers is not an easy place to play. They've pulled out a lot of big wins over the past 2 or 3 years at Rutgers. But a team like Wisconsin to go to Rutgers and lose by 22, it just raises a lot of questions about Wisconsin and how strong they really are. And it keeps Rutgers in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. I don't have them in right now, but it's an intriguing case that they're making now. And for Wisconsin, with the dramatic fall, it's going to be interesting now in the Big Ten standings. Purdue might run away with the regular season conference title with the way that Wisconsin has struggled over the last couple of games. Another team that could have used a victory was TCU going on the road to Iowa State, number 14. Again, it's not a bad loss for TCU, but it would have been a win that, again, probably would have put them on the right side of the bubble. And right now, I have them in my last 4 in. So I do have them in, but man, they are very close to that cut line. Again, we mentioned Kentucky. They are falling drastically. They really could have used a win over Gonzaga to stabilize that program. But man, John Calipari has a lot of work over these last few weeks to figure out what is going on with this team, why they're losing at home. It's 3 straight home losses for Kentucky, which is just unbelievable. And then one more team that really had a chance to improve their status was Kansas State. They went on the road at number 21 BYU and lost by 6. I still don't know if a win over BYU would have pushed them in the tournament for me, but a loss definitely puts them on the very edge of completely falling out of the discussion for the NCAA tournament. So those were some of the results over the weekend, some teams that did what they needed to do, and some teams that failed and now have to look at this last month with a lot of nervousness and anxiousness, trying to figure out where they can go from here. Okay, so looking at some of the rankings as we look down the road, as we get ready for this last month of the season. First of all, Florida Atlantic falls to number 24. I think Florida Atlantic is still safe to get in as an at-large, but they have dropped drastically in the last few weeks, have lost a couple games recently. They are not in first place. They're tied for second in the American Athletic Conference, so they need to be very careful. They're 9-2 in conference, 19-5 overall, but they do need to be very careful that they finish strong and they don't fall in the AAC standings to the point that losing early in the conference tournament could push them out of the NCAA tournament. Dayton also fell a little bit. They're down to number 16. Again, another mid-major, if you want to look at them that way, that is not in first place in their conference in the Atlantic 10. Richmond is. Again, Dayton is tied for second, but they also need to be very careful, like Florida Atlantic, not to flounder down the stretch, and that they go into their conference tournament with an either number 1 or number 2 seed and don't fail in the first or the second round of their conference tournament. Looking at the ACC, North Carolina and Duke hold pretty steady, and the hottest team right now in the ACC is Virginia. Virginia moves back into the top 25 at number 21. They have won 8 games in a row. They currently sit half a game above Duke in the ACC standings. They're number 2 in the ACC behind North Carolina, 19-5 overall, 10-3 in the ACC, and a team that a couple weeks ago looked like they may not even make it to the NCAA tournament is moving very quickly into lock status and might by the end of February be a team that we look at and say, no matter what happens from here on out, they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. Tony Bennett has drastically improved that team. They're playing much better defense. And again, they look like a team in the ACC that if North Carolina falters even a little bit, we could see Virginia as the ACC regular season champion, which is just stunning when you think about where they've come. In the Big Ten, we have a slew of ranked teams. Again, Houston, a top 4 team. Kansas sits at number 6. Iowa State at number 10. Baylor at number 12. BYU at number 19. Oklahoma at number 25. And then a couple of other teams that with a win or two in the next week could potentially move into the top 25. That list would include Texas Tech, TCU, and Texas if they can make a little run here over the next couple of weeks. So the thing to watch in the Big 12 is positioning for the Big 12 tournament. Right now, from first all the way down to 7th, there's only a 2-game difference between the two. Houston is currently in first with an 8-3 record, but there's very, very little separation here in this conference. And there are still, in my opinion, 10 or maybe even 11 teams that have a chance to get an NCAA tournament bid. And I think at the very minimum, this conference probably gets 9 bids at the very least in the NCAA tournament. Connecticut continues to sit at number 1 in the Big East and also overall in the country. And it is very quickly becoming apparent that this could be the first repeat national champion since the '06 and '07 Florida Gators. I was a little bit uneasy about Connecticut early on, but when they're playing their best, they're almost unbeatable. They have great talent, great depth, very well coached. They're more than likely going to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. They've won 12 games in a row. They've only lost one game in the Big East. They've got everything going for them, and they're looking like they're going to be the class of the nation going in to the NCAA tournament. Marquette moves up to number 4. They have now won 7 in a row after having a little bit of an up and down period in December and January. And they look like they have a chance now to potentially move onto the one line if they continue to win. And then Creighton in the Big East at number 17. There's been a lot of movement in the Big East over the last few weeks with Seton Hall and Xavier and St. John's not playing well. And then we've got the Butler Bulldogs all of a sudden getting in the mix in the Big East and in the national discussion for a tournament bid. The Big Ten, for most of the season, they've had 3 ranked teams, and they still have those 3 ranked teams. Even though Wisconsin has fallen over the last week or two, Wisconsin still slots in at number 20. Purdue number 2, Illinois number 14. Purdue has won 8 games in a row. They now have a 2.5 game lead over second place Illinois in the Big Ten. I think they're going to run away with the Big Ten regular season and the Big Ten tournament, and they should very well be a number 1 seed in March. And unless something drastically changes, Zach Edey will win his second National Player of the Year award here in just a couple of weeks. Okay, looking at the Missouri Valley Conference, and I have to give it up for Indiana State. If you know the history of college basketball, the name Larry Bird is one of the top names overall on the Mount Rushmore of college basketball players of all time. Led Indiana State to the national championship game in 1979, undefeated until they lost to Magic Johnson and Michigan State in the national championship. Well, since he left Indiana State, it's been an up and down program. They have had some success, but definitely not a program that got to the heights it did when Bird was there. Well, for the first time since Larry Bird was a player, Indiana State is back in the top 25, and they sit at number 23. And it's not a joke. Indiana State is 22-3 overall, 13-1 in the Missouri Valley Conference. They've won 9 games in a row. They can play at about any pace that an opposition wants to play at. They pass the ball well. They're a positionless basketball team with players who can play all sorts of different positions on the floor. Penn State is going to be a very dangerous and scary team in March. And even if they don't win the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, this is going to be a team that you're going to see in the bracket because of the computer rankings that they do have. The Mountain West did get shut out of the top 25 this week, but they have 4 or 5 teams knocking on the door of the top 25. I'm not worried about the conference. Right now, there's so much parity there that they're just kind of knocking each other off. But come tournament time, they're going to be a dangerous group. In the Pac-12, the only ranked team is Arizona. They have now won 5 in a row, again, after having a little bit of trouble early in conference season. Nobody else is ranked, though. And the SEC, probably the second deepest conference in the country, behind the Big 12, now has 5 ranked teams. And even though Kentucky has dropped drastically, Alabama, South Carolina, Auburn, and Tennessee are all comfortably in the top 25. Tennessee being the highest of those 4 at number 8, South Carolina number 11, Auburn number 13, and Alabama number 15. The SEC also has depth with Texas A&M, Florida, and Ole Miss all sitting right there with a chance to enter the top 25 if they have that possibility. St. Mary's sits at number 18. They are the class of the West Coast Conference. And like we talked about with Gonzaga, if Gonzaga wants to get into the tournament, they probably need to beat St. Mary's once or maybe twice in the conference tournament. St. Mary's has won 12 in a row, and them and Indiana State are both mid-major teams to keep an eye on as we enter the final month of the season. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to reveal my top 16 teams at this point in the season. If the tournament started today, which teams would have 1 seeds, 2 seeds, 3 seeds, and 4 seeds? I will be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
What's up everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tyvus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the second half of the Full 40 College Basketball Podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. So on Saturday, February 17th at 12:30 on CBS, the NCAA Tournament Committee is going to release who they think would be the top 16 teams, seeds 1 through 4, that would be the top 16 in the NCAA tournament if the tournament started today. So this is a moment in time with just a couple weeks left in the regular season to see what the NCAA Tournament Committee is looking at, what they're investigating as far as statistics and computer numbers that matter to them, and it gives teams an idea of what they need to do to maintain one of those top 4 seeds, or what it's going to take for teams outside of that top 16 to get into those top 4 seeds. One of the benefits of being in the top 16 when it comes to the NCAA tournament is that the committee tries very hard to favor those teams as far as geographical locations for the first and second round. So if you are in that top 16, they're going to try to help you play closer to home and help your team travel less, and then also give your fans and school a better chance of getting to the games and creating more of a home court advantage. It doesn't always work that way, but it definitely does create a little bit of an advantage for some of the top teams in March. So I'm going to go through who I think at this point are my top 16. I'm going to go through with the 4 number 1s, the 4 number 2s, the 4 number 3s, and the 4 number 4s. I'm going to look at the computer ratings, the official rankings that the NCAA uses, which are called the net rankings. I'm also using the Massey rankings to help solidify my positioning. And then I'm also looking at quality wins that the NCAA committee is looking at. They have a system, and I'll try to explain it quickly. They have a system that has 4 quarters or 4 quads: quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, and quad 4. Quad 1 is a win-loss record against great teams at home or good to great teams on the road. Those are victories that look very good on your resume, and if you lose those games, they're not going to destroy you. They're still, if you can say that that was a quality loss, a loss to a quad 1 team would be considered a quality loss. Similar with Quad 2. Quad 2 is a little bit lower ranked teams, but if you get a Quad 2 win, it's still a pretty high quality win, either at home or on the road. A loss in Quad 2 still isn't terrible, but it's not quite the same, and it could hurt in the long run. Quad 3 and Quad 4 are teams that are near the bottom, either low major or very poor mid-major teams. Quad 3 and Quad 4 wins don't really count for much, but if you lose to Quad 3 or Quad 4 teams, that looks very bad on a resume. A record or a Quad 4 loss could be the difference between a team getting in or getting out. And so what I've done is a breakdown of the teams that I have ranked. If they have Quad 1 or 2 wins, I'm going to talk about those. Those are the good wins. And if they have any Quad 3 or 4 losses, those are bad losses. I hope that makes sense. It is very confusing, and not many people understand, and it is also hard. Sometimes it seems outrageous how the committee uses these rankings and these records to determine who gets in and who gets out when it comes to March. Okay, so I'm throwing the AP poll completely out of consideration now because the poll is a human poll that is voted on by different people, but the computer numbers give a much better idea of not just where teams are in the present tense, but also looking at where they've been and where they could potentially go for the rest of the season. So based on that, my number 1 overall seed, the number 1 seed, and then the number 1 overall seed is going to be Purdue. Purdue currently sits at number 2 in the net rankings, at number 1 in the Massey ratings. They have the most Quad 1 and 2 wins in the country with a total of 15, and they have 0 bad losses, which would have fallen into Quads 3 or 4. So every loss they do have has been a quality loss, and they really have just dominated in every aspect of the season. Again, 15 quality wins is the most in the NCAA. So Purdue is my number 1 overall seed. My second overall seed, who is a number 1 seed, is going to be Connecticut. Again, Connecticut sits at number 1 in the AP poll. I have them a little bit lower than Purdue, though, because Connecticut does sit at number 4 in the net rankings, number 2 in the Massey rankings. They have 13 Quad 1 and 2 wins, 0 Quad 3 and 4 losses. Their resume looks incredible, but right now I have Purdue just a little bit above them. I think most of the reasoning there is because Purdue played a little bit tougher schedule in the non-conference, but it is nip and tuck between those two teams. The third number 1 seed that I have is Houston, the Houston Cougars. The top team right now in the Big 12, they sit at number 1 in the net rankings, number 3 in the Massey rankings. They have 9 Q1 and Q2 wins combined and 0 Quad 3 and Quad 4 losses. Houston is going to be a very tough team, and in a very tight Big 12, they at least right now are at the top of that crop, at the top of the heap, and so they would be a number 1 seed if the season ended today and the tournament started tomorrow. And then my last number 1 seed would be Arizona. Arizona out of the Pac-12, again, they struggled in December and January to get their footing. They have found that footing. They sit at the top of the Pac-12. I don't think anyone else in the Pac-12 is going to challenge them for that conference title. They sit at number 3 in the net rankings, number 4 in the Massey rankings. They have 10 Q1 and Q2 wins. They do have 1 Q3 or Q4 loss, but that was earlier in the year. They have recovered. They are my 4th number 1 seed. So the number 1 seeds in order: Purdue, Connecticut, Houston, and Arizona. And I think those 4, at least the top 3, have created some distance there with Purdue, Connecticut, and Houston. You drop down a little bit with Arizona, but I think they're still a pretty clear-cut number 1 seed and that 4th number 1 seed overall. Okay, now moving down to the number 2 line. My top number 2 seed is North Carolina. North Carolina sits at the top of the ACC. They are number 10 in the net rankings, number 6 in the Massey rankings. They have 10 really quality Q1 and Q2 wins and only 1 quad 3 or quad 4 loss. They look like they're going to be the class of the ACC. They did have that slip up against Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago, but they are still my clear favorite to win the ACC, and that should secure them at the very worst a number 2 seed, but they have a real chance to move up to that 1 line if they continue to excel, win the ACC regular season, and win the ACC tournament. I think at that point they would be a number 1 seed if they were to complete that. The second number 2 seed is Tennessee. Tennessee, number 6 in the net rankings, number 9 in the Massey rankings. 9 quality wins, 0 bad losses. They are right there in contention for an SEC title. It's very tight at the top right now. Tennessee has struggled a little bit on the road and against more physical teams. I still have them as the best team in the SEC slightly, and therefore I have them as the highest ranked SEC team currently. I have them as a number 2 seed, the second number 2 seed. The third number 2 seed is Kansas. Kansas got a big win over Baylor at home over the weekend. They sit at number 12 in the net rankings, number 5 in the Massey ratings, 10 quality wins, 1 bad loss. It's going to be very close between them and Houston for the Big 12 title, and Kansas has one of the toughest strength of schedules in the country. I think Kansas is very well positioned. Like I said with North Carolina, if Kansas can win the Big 12 regular season and the Big 12 conference tournament, there's no way the committee can keep them out of a number 1 seed on Selection Sunday. Right now, though, I have them as a number 2 seed. And then finally, my last number 2 seed, the number 8 team overall in the standings, would be Marquette. Shaka Smart has his team, again, back flowing. They look like a great team right now, sitting near the top of the Big East standings behind Connecticut. But they sit at number 11 in the net rankings, number 7 in the Massey rankings, 8 quality wins, 0 bad losses. Marquette has got to keep up their level of play, though, because they are right on the edge of falling into that 3 or 4 line if they misstep here in the next couple weeks. I don't know if they have what it takes to get to the 1 line, just because Connecticut right now is creating a barrier to that based on their standings in the Big East. But Marquette can really solidify their spot in the 2 line with quality play the rest of the way. All right, let's move down to the 3 line. So the top number 3 team I have right now is Alabama. Alabama is sitting at the top of the SEC standings. It's tight at the top, but they are right there. They're number 5 in the net ranking, number 8 in the Massey ranking. They have 8 quality wins, 0 bad losses. The only thing holding Alabama back a little bit is that they did not play the toughest non-conference schedule, but they have proven their worth and their quality at least halfway through the SEC schedule. Alabama is one of the most balanced teams. They score at a high level. They're very efficient. The SEC, overall, I don't know if they can get a number 1 seed just because they're beating each other up so badly that they're just adding loss upon loss to some of the top teams. But Alabama, of all the teams, maybe Tennessee as well, has a chance to get to that 1 line if they really dominate the rest of the year. Right now, though, I have Alabama as the top number 3 seed. The second number 3 seed, I have Iowa State. Iowa State is a team that's been a little bit surprising to me this season. I thought they would be good, but they're playing at a very high level. They're right in the hunt at the top of the Big 12. And I think we're going to see multiple Big 12 teams. I've already listed off Houston and Kansas. Iowa State is the third Big 12 team I already have in my rankings, and they're coming in at the 3 line. They're number 9 in the net rankings, number 11 in the Massey. 7 quality wins, 0 bad losses. They're getting hot at the right time. I don't think they can win the Big 12 regular season or conference tournaments, but that should not hold them back from a top 4 or a top 16 finish, being in the top 4 seeds. And right now, I have them as my second number 3 seed. Overall, that would put them at number 10 in my top 16. At number 3, my third number 3 would be Auburn, the Auburn Tigers. Number 7 in the net rankings, number 10 in the Massey, 8 quality wins, 0 bad losses. The only thing that's holding me back on Auburn is just their inconsistency, as well as having played a very poor non-conference schedule. I'm still trying to figure out how good they actually are. I know that Bruce Pearl's going to have them ready for March, and that he's a very motivational coach who's tough to beat in March. They still have some work to do to prove to me that they are a top 16 team and that they deserve this number 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. And then finally, my last number 3 seed is the Baylor Bears. Another Big 12 team that falls in this top 16. Baylor had a chance to move up drastically on Saturday, but unfortunately they lost a very tight game to Kansas at Kansas. So it was a missed opportunity, but I don't count it against them too bad. That's a very tough place to win, a very tough place to play at Allen Fieldhouse. Baylor is comfortable in my top 16, number 12 overall, my last number 3 seed. They are 13th in the net ranking, 12 in Massey, 8 quality wins, and 0 bad losses. Scott Drew, the 2021 national champs, and they are right back in the hunt, potentially to get to that level again if they continue to play at the level they are. All right, so my last 4 teams remaining. These would be the number 4 teams and the last teams in the top 16 that will be revealed. First of all, at the number 13 team overall, or if you want to look at it as the first number 4 seed, is Creighton. So Creighton is the third team I have out of the Big East. They're 16th in the net, 16th in Massey, 9 quality wins, and 0 bad losses. The question I have for Creighton is that they play very well at home. They are a tough team to beat at Creighton, but they still have some road questions as far as can they win on the road or on neutral courts. I think McDermott is a great coach. He made it to the Elite Eight last year, and they have the same type of team this year. So Creighton is my first number 4 seed and 13th overall in my top 16 rankings. At number 14 overall, and the second team out of the Big Ten, I have Illinois as a number 14 or a number 4 seed. They are 14th in the net, 14th in the Massey. 7 quality wins, 1 bad loss. It looks right now like they will finish second in the Big Ten, barring some disaster for Purdue or some miracle for Illinois. They're one of the deepest teams in the country. I have a lot of faith in this team, and I think we're going to see their name called this upcoming Saturday when the committee actually reveals their top 16. I have them at 14 and the second number 4 seed overall. My third number 4 seed and number 15 overall, I have Utah State. Utah State out of the Mountain West Conference. They do not have the best numbers overall. They're number 28 in the net, number 20 in the Massey. The thing that helps them out a lot is that they have 8 quality wins, 0 bad losses, and in a Mountain West where it's been just an unbelievable dog-eat-dog type scenario. Utah State still finds themselves at the top of that heap. I have faith in this team. I thought back and forth between them and San Diego State, but San Diego State lost over this past weekend, so I put Utah State in. I could not leave the Mountain West Conference out of my top 16. That conference just has too many good teams, too many quality teams, and so Utah State is a number 4 seed and the 15th on my list. So I have one more team to put in my top 16, and before I reveal that, just a couple teams that I considered but did not have in my top 16: Oklahoma, BYU, Texas Tech, San Diego State. If I had to make a top 20, those would be in my top 20. But at number 16, the last team who will be a number 4 seed is Duke. The Blue Devils out of the ACC, number 17 in the net, 13 in the Massey. They have 5 quality wins, 1 bad loss. The thing with Duke, though, is that they've gotten stronger as the season has gone on. They don't have, again, the best computer numbers, but Filipowski continues to get better. I think Coach Shire has found a steady position for all his players. I think this pick for me with Duke is a projection of where they should go and could go in the next month of the season. So I have them in at number 16, the last number 4 seed. So I'm very interested to see on Saturday where the committee has teams seated, what teams get into their top 16, and that's going to raise a lot of questions about where we are headed for the last month. On my next podcast, I will take a look at those 16 teams that they reveal, compare them to my 16, and then see where we differ and where we agree. And that's going to be a conversation that really gets us going for March. So the picture is really coming more clear. We are seeing a drastic difference in how teams are playing at this point. Again, February 17th, 12:30 on CBS, the committee reveals their top 16 for where we are right now in the season. And from that point on, things just hit a whole different level, a whole different gear, and there's no going back at that point. I really appreciate you tuning in to this episode of the Full 40 podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network, and I will talk to you all soon. Thank you for listening to the Press Play Podcast Network. To follow us on X, look up Press Play Pods. For sponsorship plans and more information, please email admin@pressplaypodcast.com. And to listen to all our shows and learn more about our network, please visit www.pressplaypodcasts.com.